So you've completed the assessment process and you're setting up programs for your learner. So the question now is, how can you know that the programs you've created are effective for your learner? And how can we make sure that we're effectively measuring progress in ABA?
Hi, I'm Shira.
And I'm Shayna.
We're behavior analysts who create weekly content about how to teach kids with autism so that they make real progress. And we create shareable resources to make your job just a little easier. Today's topic is all about measuring progress in ABA. And if you want more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated on new video releases.
So last year, I signed up for a fitness program. It was designed to increase my endurance on a bicycle. But included with the program was something called an FTP test. Not sure what that acronym is, but I was supposed to take this test at the beginning of the program as my baseline, and then I was supposed to take it at regular intervals throughout the program. Essentially, it's measuring my progress. And I look at that and I think, well, that isn't our traditional ABA program and working with kids with autism, but in everything we do, we should be measuring progress.
And one of the things that, we take very seriously as AV professionals is our data collection. But I think sometimes we may get a little bit stuck in what the purpose of the data are. How much data do we want to collect? What are we doing with all that information? Really, the important thing is, what do we want the data to tell us? What do we want to find out from this data? And how is it going to be meaningful? Because collecting tons and tons of data and not doing anything with that is really not helpful at all. But collecting like little bits of information that can help us make really important decisions is really ultimately the purpose of collecting data.
And I think as we talk about data collection, we also have to talk about data analysis. And you almost have to think about what you want the data to show you and what you're actually going to analyze in the data when you're creating these data sheets.
So when we're writing programs, we usually include, or we'll always include some way of tracking progress with those programs. Any program that we'll put in place, from beginner, play-based program, all the way through to life skills or behavior management or any kind of program we're putting in place, there's always going to be a data component so that we'll be able to check in and know if the learner is making progress, whether in a skill acquisition way that they're gaining skill or in reducing some challenging behavior. And the things that we think about when we're putting these data in place is what we want to measure, who is collecting data. So is it somebody who's like really savvy at collecting data and they're able to have, a clicker going, but also maybe a partial interval recording sheet going, and like they really know how to collect data? Or might it be a little bit more of a struggle, which is okay because we can choose data that will help them with that. But we also really think about the profile of the learner. What does the profile of the learner look like? Are they a quick learner? Do they need some repetitive trials? Is it a play-based program? Is it more of a academic type program? Is it life skills? Are you in the community? All of these things really, really matter. So the environment matters. What that setting looks like. A data sheet for a classroom is going to look very different than a program and data sheet in the community or in somebody's home.
Can you imagine giving a teacher a data sheet and says, okay, you have to collect percentage correct data all throughout the day. And while you're at it, here's a clicker and here's a partial interval data sheet. I know you've got 30 students, but you got this.
Funny because teachers love percentages, but they don't realize that data sheets that involve percentages are really not recommended.
So we definitely have to look at that. We're actually doing a CEU on this in September. It's on September 12th. And we're going to go through just how to choose the right data collection method. And, basically what are the data collection methods, why we choose this one over this one. So if you're interested in finding out more about data collection, please join us for our CEU. There'll be a link in this podcast for that as well. And if you can't make it live, you can definitely make it asynchronous. So we'll have that recorded after the fact as well.
We also have our other video on choosing the right data collection method, which goes through a bunch of different options. On our CEU, we're going to be talking mostly for like the one-to-one programming and how we choose that data collection that goes along with the programs that we write. The first thing that we do when we're putting a program in place is after we've done the assessment and we've gotten a profile approximately of what the learner's profile is, where some of the strengths are, where some of the deficits are, we would then go in and baseline. So if we have, it's really a goal from the parents, and we've seen it from the assessment that this learner needs to learn labels, for example, we would go in and probe and do a baseline on where their labels are at. And actually, we're the ones that do that baseline. We like to do it because it really feeds into how we create the program. So if we run a couple labels, and maybe they knew most of them, but they only had a couple that they were stuck on, and those are ones that anyway are kind of they don't see all the time. We may choose to put in just a simple yes no data sheet on a couple of targets that they weren't sure of. If we go in and test their labels and they really didn't have a strong repertoire of labels, then we may go in with more of a percentage trial by trial style of teaching labels. If we've started to probe or baseline their labels, and we see that from the beginning of when we started probing till the end, they learned so many labels just through exposure or just through whatever we were doing with them. Then we may choose something like, again, a yes, no, or probe, because it might be quick learners. And then doing something like trial by trial on a set of, 3 or 4 targets, having to do that repeatedly will really only hold them back from moving quicker through the labels.
So many times I've gone into an ABA program and I look at the data sheet and it'll have, either set one or it'll have label one or whatever target they're working on. So just pretend it's teaching set number one. And they are, they've taught it and they've, mastery criterion is 80% for 2 days. But the first day the learner got 80%. And then they did it again the next day and the learner got 90%. And then they, did a phase change because mastery criteria is 80% for 2 days. And then they went on to the next set and the learner may have gotten 70% and then 90% and then 100%. Anyway, my point is that, 6 days go by, 8 days go by, but there really hasn't been any teaching because the learner knew this stuff to begin with. So either there was no baseline done or they did a baseline, but the learner was a quick learner and went, oh, this is what you're asking of me. It's not that I didn't know labels, I just didn't know the expected response. But now that I know the expected response, I got this. So you really have to make sure that when we're looking at data and data collection, that the student is actually learning and you're actually teaching the student. Otherwise, we're just wasting their time. They're sitting there and they're responding, but they're like, no, I know this. This is kind of an easy ride for me.
Yeah. And so often I'll also see a program where maybe they're teaching a whole set of labels. So maybe they're even teaching a set of 5 or 6 and they're doing percentage data. And the data keeps showing, 40%, 60%, 50%, where like they're not mastering. And really that might be because they're stuck on one. There was one label in there that they didn't know. And we just keep repeating the set of 5, but it's not giving us important information, which is the one that they're actually struggling with. So we want to really be able to pull that apart. I think the other common thing that I see in programming is teaching one target at a time. So choosing one target, having them reach 80% on that one target, moving on, choosing another target. First of all, in the meantime, you're forgetting all the ones that they've learned before because you're moving so slowly. And it really just promotes a lot of memorization. They've learned when I hear the SD, what is it? I'm just learning to rote memorize this one response, when we want to be mixing up targets, really including a lot of mastered sets with a lot of current targets, constantly having a random rotation set so that we are continuing to practice. And by doing this, we're really helping to prevent a lot of memorization that happens when you only expose them to one target at a time.
What else can I tell you? What else do we see, Shira? I also see sometimes I'll set up, instead of a percentage correct data sheet, I set up a yes no data sheet because I want to see which target, the student's erring on, and that's awesome. But then if it's a yes no data sheet, sometimes I see therapists and they're like, oh, so that means I only need to do one teaching trial and that's it. I'm not understanding that the first trial is actually the probe trial and they should still be doing multiple trials after that, but they can drop their pencil and they can actually just teach. So those are some common errors that we see, and we'll be going over this a lot in the CEU that we do. You mentioned assessments, you mentioned program writing, that kind of thing. We probably should mention that here is that we actually have a whole series of CEUs that we've done actually just over the past few months. And the first CEU really just targets in depth that intake assessment, not even intake. I mean, if you've had a learner for a while, it's really just an assessment, but it's how we do our assessments. And then the second CEU that we have is, not just then like, okay, you've done the assessment. Now let's look at the actual profile of the learner and come up with a program plan. And what does that program plan look like? And how do we choose programs based on that assessment? And then the next CEU after that we have, and we go into program writing in detail. And normally our CEUs are 1 hour. The one on program writing is 2 hours because there was just so much information. And we didn't want to cut any of it out because it was a lot, but it was all relevant. So it's a 2 hour presentation on just how to write programs in general and how to, I guess, get inside our heads. So the one coming up in September is kind of the follow-up. It's one of the last ones in this series, and it's the one on choosing the right data collection now that you've done the assessment, done the program plan, and written the programs.
And then, like we said, you can't have data collection without being able to analyze that data. So remembering to always be on top of reading that data and thinking about the questions that we just mentioned. Like, is this giving me the information? What are they really struggling with? What can I change or pull out of here to get better information? Are they bored? Did they actually learn anything? There's so many great questions that are really important in the process of data collection. And so we hope you all join us.
So click the link in and around this video to join our next live CEU. It's on measuring progress for ABA programs. We're going to take you from baseline through mastery. It's on Thursday, September 12th at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Join us live or check out the recording after the fact in our membership.
We also encourage you to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future videos and leave a like and comment below if you have further questions.